Hey, I'm Max and welcome to another devlog. In this video, I will be showing you the process of making a prototype for a game idea I had. The idea is pretty simple. The player is in a wheelchair that rolls around and the user can use the hand by moving around the mouse to swing around a whip. And when that whip hits something, it grabs onto it, so then you can pull on it to pull yourself up and around obstacles to reach the end goal. However, I severely underestimated how hard it would be to make a physics-based movement system. First of all, I knew since the game start that I would have to make this game using C++ and not Blueprint. The reason for that is that I will be using some pretty advanced features like messing with individual bones, and I wasn't sure if they were all available in Blueprint because some features are not available in Blueprint, only C++, and there was also a risk of getting very laggy, so I thought doing it in C++ would reduce that risk. I also want to get more experience in Unreal C++. I already know C++ pretty well, but Unreal Engine uses a bunch of macros and other things that make it almost a different language, so I wanted to have some experience with that as well. I started off by making a basic whip, which is simply a cylinder with a bunch of bones imported as a skeletal mesh. It worked pretty well with the simulation right away. Next, I had to spawn a whip with my player and attach it to the player. I barely had any experience with C++, so it took me a while to do it. First, I had to create my C++ class for my whip actor so I can spot it from the code. Then, when the player spawns, I spawn a whip and attach it to the player's hand. For some reason, at first it didn't attach to the hand, but instead to like the hips, but I fixed that. And there you go, the simulation was already pretty good. Sometimes the whip would go inside of meshes and get stuck, but not too often. Next, I modeled a wheelchair for my character. I made some simple animations for sitting and moving because I don't need much animations if the player is going to sit in a wheelchair. Also, I don't need to do the animations for the arm because it's going to be moved in game and the animations are going to be done in Unreal Engine. I also edited the code to make the player movement more realistic for a wheelchair, so no moving side to side, and also no jump. My first attempt at putting the chair in the game was not so good, but quickly I fixed that and it was pretty good. The collision still feels pretty weird because it's still just a capsule the shape of the player, so let's say you have a wheel on the side of the mesh, you're not going to fall. But when I put the wheels physics, they should be the ones to handle physics collisions, so if you had just one wheel on a mesh, you should fall to the side. Then I enabled collisions between the player, the chair and the whip, which gives a cool effect when the whip goes around the player and then wraps around the chair. Unlike before when I was going through the chair, which obviously is not very realistic. Next, I started working on moving the hand with the mouse. I got it working decently, but I soon realized there was a huge problem with that, and that is the controls feel very bad. I don't know how I didn't think of this earlier, but the hand moves in 3 directions. It can move up and down, left and right, towards the camera and away from the camera. On top of that, it also rotates in 3 directions. However, when you move your mouse, you only move in 2 directions and you have no rotation. I tried many things and they all felt terrible. Eventually, I decided to make the forward movement using the mouse wheel. It's not perfect, but it works. I didn't find any solution for the rotation, but I found that it doesn't affect the way the whip moves very much. The next thing I did was work on detecting collisions with the whip and, more importantly, which bone of the whip collided with the object. The next part was the most difficult. Now that I know how to do it, it's actually pretty simple, but it took me a while to find it. I wanted to make the whip stick to the surfaces when it hits so that you can then pull yourself to it. First, I tried disabling the simulation for the bones when they hit something, but that sent them back in their original pose, which is a straight line. Over the next days, I tried many things such as saving the whip's shape as an animation snapshot, and then setting the whip's pose to that snapshot, hoping that turning off the simulation would then make it snap to that pose and stay in position. The problem with that is that when the player rotates, the animation stays the same, but the point changes compared to the player. I eventually found out about physics constraints, and after messing with them for a bit, I found the way to do it. The whip can now wrap around and stick to surfaces. However, it was still hard to release the whip because even if I released the stick points, it would instantly collide and stick again. It also bugged around a lot when I moved away from it while it was stuck, and that's because it wasn't allowed to stretch, and I still haven't found how to fix this actually. Next, I tried to detect when the whip was getting stretched and apply a force to the player to simulate tension. It felt very realistic the first time. No, but really, after tweaking the numbers a little bit, it actually felt pretty good. But a big problem still was that the slight movement of the hand was not enough to pull the player that much. It was also pretty much impossible to control. Most of the time I just ended up getting pulled right into the object and then stopping there. Still, I made a little map with trees, hoping that in a real environment it would feel better, but it actually felt worse. And keep in mind that it still doesn't have the wheel physics, so with the wheel physics rolling down the hill, it will feel even worse. I don't know if it can really be made easy to control and fun to play, because right now you can barely move yourself when you move your hand with the whip, and if I increase the force too much, then you move so much that you can't control it. So let's just say for now that this prototype was a failure, sadly. However, I did learn a bunch of things about physics and C++, so I'm happy I did it. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, consider subscribing, it would help me out a lot.